Hey guys, welcome to the first official podcast episode of The Way of the Rosary. I say official because we've been recording content for quite a while. We've had a lot of content that we created inside of our Way of the Rosary community, and then we've started to put some of that content on YouTube. And today we are officially launching a podcast so that we can get more of this content out to a broader audience and hopefully invite you guys into our Way of the Rosary community. This series that we are embarking on now is about the fruits of the mysteries of the Rosary. And this is a subject that we've talked a little bit about within our community, but not very much. It's something that, at least for me personally, these fruits have kind of been just like an aspect of the Rosary that for me, I've kind of like put on the shelf, like I'll learn more about that later. Over the past couple of years, we first dove into the promises of the Rosary, and we spent the entire year really learning and understanding what those promises of the Rosary really looked like, what they look like in our lives, and how we can recognize them and get more of them in our lives. And then year two, we talked about the mysteries of the Rosary and really diving deeply into each one of the mysteries and looking at them through a bunch of different aspects, looking at their connections to the Old Testament, looking at the context in the New Testament. We looked at lives of the saints. We looked at church teaching and also some like modern day stories, like how we really in our daily lives get practical and connect these mysteries to our lives, and just spent a ton of time unpacking each of the mysteries. And Father Mark Mary, in his Rosary in a Year podcast, talks about something that I really love. He talks about building a treasury for us to kind of pull from as we're praying our daily Rosary. And I love that idea. And so that's what we're doing here with the fruits of the Rosary. I want to begin by talking kind of high level a little bit about the fruits of the Rosary, where they come from and what their purpose is. And then we're going to kick off our first fruit. So this week, we're going to be talking all about the Annunciation, the fruit of humility. And as we, over the course of this season, work our way through each of the fruits of the mystery, we're going to connect that with a saint that helps us to really understand this mystery and learn more about it. And then we're going to get really practical about how we take what we've learned from this saint, how we really take the fruit of this mystery and really like boots on the ground, how we get that into our daily lives. Because St. Louis de Montfort said, the Rosary is like the tree of life, and we have to extract the fruit from it. And that's what we're attempting to do here. And so the fruits of the Rosary, kind of the idea sort of began with St. Louis de Montfort, though he didn't outline them in exactly the way that we know today. St. Louis de Montfort spoke more generally that the Rosary has fruits, and he wrote lots. He was a very prolific writer, and he wrote a lot of very short books. In fact, I'll paraphrase, but in The Secret of Mary, another like very short book, you can download it from EWTN. It's really good. I highly recommend it. And it's only like 16 pages. And in the beginning, he said something, and I'll paraphrase, basically like, I have very little time to write, and I know that you have very little time to read, so I'll just jump right into it and get to the point. And that's exactly what he does in it, especially his shorter writings. And he has one about methods of praying the Rosary, and he outlines a variety of ways that we can pray on the Rosary, that we can pray through the Rosary. And though he does not outline the fruits as one of the methods of like meditation, he outlines a few other ideas, and that's kind of where the fruits of the rosary kind of began, and they sort of developed over the years. And there isn't really one author who contributed to what we know as the fruits of the rosary today. And in fact, there's even there's other like versions where people have kind of added or rearranged some of the fruits. And all of that is totally okay. And maybe as Catholics, our heart starts to beat a little fast when we hear about people, kind of adding and changing things, because there are certain truths within our Catholic faith that are immovable. There are parts, the Mass is a beautiful example of that. The Mass is something that if the celebrant kind of goofs it up, there are parts where if he says different words added in his own or even accidentally, a Mass can be invalidated if it's goofed up. And thankfully for us, the rosary is not like that at all. You can't goof up the rosary. It's okay to take these methods of praying the rosary and do what works for you. And that was kind of St. Louis de Montfort's intentions in writing his little booklet on the methods of praying the rosary. He gave a variety, I think half a dozen different ways to kind of pray through the rosary, to meditate on different things. And this method of praying the rosary by praying with the fruits of the rosary is another example of that. So this is a way to pray. This isn't the way that you have to pray. So if you get busy and overwhelmed, don't feel like if you don't think about the fruits of the rosary that you're doing it wrong or that you're messing it up, or don't allow yourself to get overwhelmed. If these are meant to be added to your treasury. So add these kind of like a library, like we're building this beautiful library to pull from. And so as we're learning about these saints and we're learning about these mysteries, the mysteries and the fruits, write it in your book, put it up on the shelf, and then when the time comes, when it's right to pull it down and to open that up and to pray with that, do that. But if you are just struggling to pray and you're having a hard time with getting your daily rosary in, and trying to remember the fruits of the mysteries is tripping you up, then leave the book on the shelf for now and just focus on Our Lady and our Lord. To Jesus through Mary is the essence of the rosary. And if anything that we're doing distracts us from going to Jesus through Mary, then it probably should be left on the shelf for a little while. But we continue to build this library, this treasury, even while we're in the busyness, because knowing these things and knowing we have access to these things, even if we're not using it every single day, gives us it gives us like a glimpse of the future. It gives us that kind of longing for what's next. And it gives us a place to go when the Lord begins to tug on our heart to call us a little bit deeper into prayer. We don't spend a season like wondering, what is it, Lord? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to deepen my prayer? You can go right to your library and pull down the fruit or the promise or the saint that the Lord is kind of using to kind of rouse your heart and tug at it a little bit. And you can pray with that for a little bit. And then the rosary, our way of praying the rosary is very much like the rosary itself, where one bead leads to the next, and one prayer, one just moment with the Lord of devotion, of love, leads to the next. And each of those moments, bead by bead, moment by moment, we're led deeper into the heart of Jesus by Our Lady. So at the outset, that is my advice to you, not to be overwhelmed, not to ever be discouraged that you're not praying well enough, that you're not praying deeply enough, that you're not praying often enough. Just begin. Give the Lord what you have, and then watch Our Lady lead you deeper, bead by bead, day by day, moment by moment. Give her what you have. Give her what you're able to offer. Shove out any discouragement, any shame, any negative feelings that we have around our devotion to the rosary, and allow the Lord to just lead you deeper in peace and in love, and just do it. Just begin. That's always what we say about the rosary. Just begin. So let's do that right now. We will just begin. We're going to begin, of course, with the joyful mysteries. We're going to be talking about the Annunciation, the fruit of humility, and Saint Francis of Assisi. And of course, we think about humility. Who better to teach us about humility than Saint Francis of Assisi? Very well known, very, very well known for his poverty, his embrace. He talked about lady poverty, and it was his spouse. It was a lifestyle, more than a lifestyle. He embraced poverty in a radical way. And we know the story. Saint Francis gave up a life of wealth. He gave up a life of excess, a life of sin and indulgence and everything that he could want. A life with great pride. He had a lot to be proud about with his family's business and their status. And he turned his eyes to the heart of our Lord and embraced poverty in a way that has had ripple effects throughout the entire world. The Franciscan movement, the Franciscan charism, is something that has deep effects in the life of the church, even outside of Franciscan orders. And this embrace of humility is something that each of us need to grow a little bit deeper in. And when we pray about the Annunciation and we look at Our Lady's humility and the humility that it took for her to say yes, and the humility that we can kind of juxtapose the humility of Mary when the angel told her about her son, and kind of compare that to Zechariah and his reaction and the consequences of Zechariah's reaction to the angel about his son. And Mary, in her humility, she asked a question, and that, they both asked a question. And at first glance, you can look at what, how Mary was treated with her question and Zechariah's question, and those questions kind of seem the same until you look a little bit deeper. And what we discover when you look deeper is humility. And for Mary, she accepted what the angel said. She accepted the what, and she just wondered about the how. And it was that humility that allowed her to accept the will of God. And for Zechariah, his lack of humility pushed him to question what the angel was saying. It wasn't how. He knew how, how babies are created, but he wondered at what the angel said. He doubted what the angel was telling him. He doubted the power of God. And that was his own pride and his own lack of humility. And so in the mystery, we can see humility in its truest form, and then we can look to the broader context of that mystery at Zechariah and see the lack and understand that it's okay. It's not a lack of humility to ask the Lord questions in our prayer, but we should ask those questions with a foundation of humility, that we are the children of the Lord, that the Lord is the author and the director of our lives, and that we rely on him for everything, and we lean on him and trust in his ways. And it's okay to ask him how. It's okay to ask him why. But when we embrace humility, we trust in the what. We trust in what the Lord is doing, even if we don't understand why, even if we don't understand how. And in St. Francis, we see that deep embrace of humility. And St. Francis said something, because a lot of times in our humility, in our pride, we worry. And this is, there's a beautiful line from the Litany of Trust: free me from the fear, I'm not saying it exactly right, of being asked to give more than I have. I think I didn't quote that exactly right, but if you've read it, you know the line that I'm talking about. That fear of being asked to give more than I have is what sometimes causes us to doubt what the Lord is doing, because we're worried, because it sounds like what the Lord is doing, it sounds like too much. It sounds like it's going to leave us empty. And St. Francis, one of his famous quotes says, "It is in giving that we receive." And if humility had a physical form, it would be standing with our hands open before us. And this openness, like if you imagine yourself giving something with open hands, giving your life, giving your vocation, giving your career, giving your children, giving your spouse, giving your own self, your health, your ambitions, your plans, the big things to the Lord, giving the little things to the Lord, all that we have, we give to the Lord with open hands. And the Lord gratefully accepts what we give him. And then our hands are before us open and ready to receive. So it is in giving the Lord what we have that we can receive. And, kind of going back to the connection of Zechariah. Zechariah was a priest. He was a religious man. He was a faithful man. He had given the Lord lots of things, but it was a little bit more, if you could kind of make it visual, where Zechariah had this purse of the things, the aspects of his life. And he would reach in and he would give the Lord his service. He would reach in and he would give the Lord his time. He would reach in and he would give the Lord his devotion. His, maybe he gave the Lord his marriage. But his fertility and his family was something that he kind of kept. He didn't go to the Lord with open hands, like open his purse wide and give the Lord everything. He was being a little selective about what. And when humility is lacking, when pride causes you to kind of, or fear, I think is maybe another kind of antithesis of humility. Pride or fear kind of keeps you guarded. You're not able to receive what the Lord has in store for you. And so in our prayer this week, as we begin to think more about this fruit of humility, and we think about what we can learn from St. Francis, think also about this posture of your heart. Hold in your hands all that you have. And maybe this is an opportunity for imaginative prayer, for you just to spend some time with the Lord in prayer. And imagine yourself with open hands before the Lord. And put everything, like visualize everything in your life. Every aspect of yourself, your vocation, your marriage, your discernment, your job, your career, your coworkers, your children, your parents, your siblings, your friends, every aspect, all of your worries, all of your concerns, every bit of the future, every bit of your past. And picture all of those things in your hands, open hands, extended to the Lord. Give the Lord all that you have in trust, faith, with humility, and know that it is in giving that we receive. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our first official episode of the Way of the Rosary podcast. We are so excited to kick this off and to really just share the beauty of the Rosary with more and more of you. Connect with us, comment below, share this with your friends, and we'll see you guys later this week as we continue to talk about the fruit of humility. God bless.